This is my review for Nightmare on Elm Street 5, The Dream Child. The plot for this one sees heroine Alice from the previous film returning. She's now in a happy relationship with Dan. She's about to graduate from school and life is a bowl of cherries. But Freddy is about to return and turn her life upside down, and that's about all you need to get you going. Now, I've been waiting patiently throughout this Freddy series for the quality in the films to dip, and I'm sad to say that it's finally happened because I thought this film was absolutely awful. I thought the decline in this series would be like a slow dip like this from sort of Dream Warriors onwards, but it's actually more like this. Just a complete drop off a cliff. And what makes it even more surprising is that Stephen Hopkins directed this. He went on to do Predator 2 a year later, a film I absolutely love more than most people. And he also did Judgment Night, a thriller from the 90s that I really cherish. So when it came to Nightmare 5, I don't know what happened. Maybe he just did this as a career move and he didn't really have anything to say about the Freddy world. The problems begin with how they bring Freddy back. This has never been a strong suit of the series, but it's particularly bad here. In the previous film, The Dream Master, a dog pissed on Freddy's grave and that's what resurrected him. But that sequence only really lasted a few seconds and then you can sort of move on and forget about it. But the way that they bring him back in number 5 is so long and drawn out that you almost have no choice but to sit and evaluate what it is that you've just seen, and it didn't make any sense to me. So Alice falls asleep and has a dream where she stumbles across a child being born, and this child runs out of the room and then into a church, and then the floorboards start rising up in a sequence that looks like it cost quite a bit of money. They wasted it, by the way. And then Freddy's suddenly there and he's born again. Honestly, it didn't make any sense when I was watching the film. It didn't make any sense when I read the plot summary afterwards on Wikipedia. And talking about it out loud now, it still doesn't make any sense. I don't think I'm a stupid person, but I just don't get what's happened here. Something to do with a baby running into a church where Freddy is. I mean, it's just babble as far as I can tell. I think it would have been better if they'd have not even explained how Freddy came back for this movie. Just have him come back and we can use our imagination to come up with a way that works for us. Now, I said in my review for Dream Warriors that the only thing I didn't like about that film was the new added backstory that Freddy is supposedly the son of 100 rapists, or however they phrased it. I just found all that stuff really unnecessary. But rather than forget that that plot point had ever been introduced, the writers for number 5 bring it back with a vengeance. We now see the 100 rapists in a dream sequence. Amanda Kruger, Freddy's mother, her fingerprints are all over this movie in spades. I just find it really depressing that we've gone back to this. Not only that, but it now seems to be front and centre in the main story. Another complaint I've got, Freddy now seems to have the ability to kill people even if they're awake. He seems to be able to change a person's reality so that they're in a dream sequence and then swoops in for the kill. Now, when it comes to Alice, the explanation given as to how Freddy can do this is that she's pregnant and it's her unborn child's dream that she's experiencing, even though she herself is awake. Reasonable. But Dan's not pregnant, Greta's not pregnant. I'm not buying that Dan falls asleep at the wheel of that motorbike when he only got on it like 2 minutes previously. It's not like he's some trucker on the back end of a 9-hour journey through the deepest, darkest reaches of Alaska, so why would he fall asleep? And Greta, too. I mean, why would you fall asleep at a dinner party when you've got 20 people clucking away in your ear? I presume that this dinner party is not taking place at like 4 a.m. in the morning. So it seems to me like Freddy can now kill anybody when they're awake. What am I missing here? At least we still have Lisa Wilcox as Alice. She's still my favourite character in this series just because of how good she is in number 4. She's still good here, but she's got nothing to work with. She's trying her best, though. The poor lass. I can easily imagine her going up to her agent after this film and begging him to try and find her something different so she wouldn't have to do number 6. And sure enough, I've looked at the cast list for number 6 and she's not on it. I have to say the prospect of watching Freddy's Dead without Lisa Wilcox at this juncture is a little bit frightening because she's the only shining light in Dream Child. None of the other characters take any of the heavy load from her. Dan's pretty good, to be fair. I think if he'd have made it to the end of this film, it would have improved for me a lot. But none of the newer characters do anything. Greta, poor. Yvonne, even worse. I hate the fact that she doesn't believe Alice in this film. Mark, that character is absolutely all over the place. He grew on me a little bit when he survived one of Freddy's encounters quite late in the day, but the actor who plays that role, there's one scene where his acting just goes completely off the rails. It's a scene where him, Alice, and Yvonne are just walking along, and Mark loses his shit for some reason. And then he changes tack and suddenly starts apologising to Yvonne, but it's really awkwardly performed. I was sort of cringing like this. I like what they've done with Alice's dad in this film. He was a really unlikable bastard in Dream Master, but here they've made him a nice guy, which was, so credit where it's due for that, because I didn't expect that. I can't give any credit when it comes to Freddy's portrayal in this film though, because from the minute that he turns up and says, "It's a boy," I just had this instinct inside that the Looney Tunes version of Freddy had finally shown his face, and I wasn't wrong, because for the rest of this movie we get far more comic book portrayal of the character than we've seen up to this point, but it just left me yearning for the darker version from number 1, or maybe even the one from number 3, but certainly this version was not for me at all. I was tired of Freddy by the halfway point of this movie. When he does that Super Freddy thing, the corners of my mouth did start to rise up into a little bit of a smile, I will admit, but it's a bit like eating a plate of chips without a drink. Your brain sort of tells you that you're enjoying it at the time, but a couple of minutes later you just get indigestion. That Greta death scene reminded me of the scene from Matilda where the headmistress forces that boy to eat all that chocolate cake. Now that was a genuinely scary scene for me growing up, at least when I was reading the novel. I don't think the film was even out when I was a kid, but back in those days, I could believe, before teachers got a bit more regulated, that something like that could happen. But there's nothing scary about the Greta version of this, if you can call it a similar thing. Freddy's prancing around and Greta's cheeks suddenly swell up to the size of footballs. It's a silly death scene. Greta's mum, by the way, what a bitch. Dan's mum, what a bitch. And Dan's dad. As if you just turn up to the house of your dead son's pregnant girlfriend and get all funny about wanting her to hand over her child once it's born. I mean, that's just despicable behaviour, and at least Alice stood up to them and shot that shit down, as they say. Dan's death was the only kill in this film that I had any respect for once it was over, because there were some good special effects there. It involved in transforming him into a weird kind of metallic bike. I don't know what was going on, but it looked pretty cool. Although the manner of how he enters the dream world is a bit sus, as I mentioned earlier. I don't have too much more to say about this one, guys. I would not recommend this film to anybody unless you're absolutely adamant about doing a full Freddy run. God forbid anybody tried to watch this having not seen any of the previous ones. What would they think about this series? But this mess is exactly what happens sometimes when you try and churn out too many sequels in too short a space of time because of economic reasons rather than because you have a story to tell. I often find with these Nightmare on Elm Street films that there are so many details and nuances within them that I end up watching them twice in the space of 48 hours just to give myself the best possible chance of doing a good review. Did that with 1, did that with 3 and 4, didn't do it with 2 because I couldn't face it with that, and I didn't do it with this film. There was no way I was watching this film twice in a week. One viewing was going to have to do for my review, and tough shit if I forgot about anything or I didn't understand anything. If they were struggling for a story, though, or they just couldn't come up with a new angle for this, then why not just repeat what they've done before, but with consistent dream rules? And at least if we'd have got roughly the same movie of what we've had before, at least we didn't enjoy it. You know, the worst films involving Freddy are when they try and dick around with the rules, like with Freddy's Revenge, number 2, this one, and also Freddy vs. Jason, which I've not come to yet. In that case, it was more the rules for Jason than Freddy, but still. Right, let's get to the bag of terror then and wrap this mess up. There's not much in here today. Just the one bloody axe for Nightmare on Elm Street 5, The Dream Child, a shameful performance really. And that makes this easily the worst performing Freddy film in my review series. I will be back very soon for Freddy's Dead, which is part 6, and if what I hear is true, I'm in for an even worse experience than I had with this one. Yay! So until next time, cheerio, bye-bye.